Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross.
I'm Dan Ream, breathing heavily because I had to haul a massively overweight cat out of the room and prevent her from disrupting the recording today.
Yes, wanted to walk around on the tables and counter and the computer keyboard and everything else.
She's probably a familiar. I bet she's not even a real cat.
Who's familiar?
Just get rid of the goblins and some.
Oh, yes.
Some new mysterious tormentor arrives.
I never thought of it that way. Okay, I'm going to look at that cat in different ways now. We're going to talk about today. This is the first installment of this particular episode where we're going to be breaking down and talking about a dungeon. It's part of our Dungeons and Dragons breakdown episodes, I suppose.
Yeah. And just because we can never do anything smoothly as far as chronological in this year, it's actually Dragons and Dungeons.
Dragons and Dungeons, yeah.
But,
so.
you know.
It also saves us the copyright and all that stuff.
That's true. Dragons with 2 Gs.
That's right. I was trying to think what we can change on Dungeons.
Well, you could give the old spelling, D-O-N-J-O-N.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So.
Make sure you put that in the show notes. Sorry, I had to get a swig of coffee there. There's a lot to talk about. Our first dungeon for this 2025 is one that we have played through years ago. It was the very, very first thing our staff group did. And I led you guys through this dungeon titled The Sunless Citadel. The Sunless Citadel was originally published in 2000.
Actually, it goes further back.
Oh, does it? You found more. Okay.
Well, maybe not. Is 2000, would that still be 3.5?
That's 3.5,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
I will shut up. You've done your research.
No, that's all right. I'm just, very little research. It's right here in the book. But The Sunless Citadel was written by Bruce Cordell in 2000 as a beginning edition for 3rd edition adventure, a beginning adventure for 3rd edition D&D. It's been widely regarded and now shows up in the Tales from the Yawning Portal 5th edition version. It was originally given note as being a good introductory dungeon for new players and new DMs as well.
So it was a standalone originally.
Yes.
Right? And I think I remember seeing it was like clocked in at 32 pages or something very... Yeah.
Very, very small.
Slim.
Yeah. It's got a great picture, though. The original picture on the cover of the book by Bruce Cordell, really cool. Displays kind of what you would see in the last encounter.
Right, yes.
We talked quite a bit about how we're going to format this, how we're going to talk about it. One of my concerns is if someone's looking to play as a player in this, I don't want to give away spoilers. But I do want to entice people to want to play this dungeon or play through this dungeon.
So maybe if you're a player and you'll be bothered by that, if you're a player and you'd be bothered by that, do listen to this, but put it on mute, and that way we get the listen, but you don't get anything spoiled.
Yeah,
Do us a solid.
I think you'd probably, as long as you can separate your player knowledge from your character knowledge, we're not going to give away so much that you'll know everything. You still have to find everything.
I have a player that can't do that, actually.
So that player needs to mute.
I don't think he listens. This is one of the Taekwondo guys. The most enthusiastic person in the world, and just loves the game. But if I mention, you're gonna have to go search out the marrow. Then he goes and looks up everything he can online about marrow, and then and I'm like, well, you are a wizard, so you would
a wizard might do a little,
you know, and you are in a city right now, so maybe you were able to find some books and information. Okay, we'll let that slide, but
okay,
gaming.
Fair enough, but so we won't give away tons of stuff, but we will mention some of the monsters and creatures or NPCs that you will encounter inside the dungeon. We'll mention that if there are traps and puzzles and stuff, but we won't necessarily say exactly what they are, or definitely won't say exactly where they are,
or the answers,
or the answers. Yes, that is true. There, like in this one, there's a riddle.
The cheat code is
yes. If you would like to know the answer, it's a self-addressed stamped envelope with the check enclosed to Teachers in the Dungeon. No, just
with the coupon that you clipped from the magazine.
That's right. Okay, so our format for this is we're going to tell you a little bit of the lore of the dungeon so you know where it comes from. Which is part of my favorite part about this. When we said we were going to do dungeons, I was like, oh, this gives me an excuse to go and search out all the lore of these cool dungeons. So we'll talk about the lore of the dungeon, who built it, where, why, is there a reason, or, of course there's a reason, but was it to entrap creatures? Was it to worship a deity? Things like that.
Honestly, the reason is probably I would guess with a lot of homebrews, because I fall into this. It's like, no, there's just a dungeon there. Go into it,
It looked like a good place to put a dungeon. The second piece is we'll talk a little bit about each level's description. Like I said, without going into too terribly much description, we will mention some things about each level. Then the third part of this episode, we'll talk about NPCs, creatures, and inhabitants that you might encounter. And then if there are any unique characteristics, we'll wrap up with that.
And I will do, so you did all the heavy lifting on this one. I looked at some online reviews and things. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll add the wisdom of, I shouldn't say wisdom, our own impressions if we've played it, and what the general community thinks of it. Is it a good dungeon or not?
Oh, cool. I like that. All right, so let's start with a little bit of lore. The Sunless Citadel originally started as a fortress sitting on top of the earth, and it was created by most likely a dragon cult. It's an ancient citadel. There's not a ton of research or people know exactly who built it, but they believe it was a dragon cult that wanted protection, of course, and then some isolation. So it sits sort of away from anything. It's not near a populated area. It was built next to, though, a main thoroughfare between villages and cities, but kind of remotely. They believe, based on evidence that I'll mention a little bit later, they believe they're the dragon cult because there are evidence of like Ashardalon, I think he's a red dragon, Ashardalon artifacts and a shrine in this temple or in this citadel. So that's where they came up with that. Some type of a cataclysm, which I'll share some thoughts that they give in this 5th edition version in a minute. A cataclysm killed the cult members and created a rift in the earth, 250 feet wide, very long in nature. I don't know that it gives that statistic, but the citadel sank into this rift, and the top of the citadel sits roughly 85 feet below the earth. If you stand on the edge of the rift and look down, you can see the top of it. Most of it is buried, but where you enter, you can see that. There is a zigzag staircase carved into the stone wall that if you recall, you guys go down. It's not especially, you do deck saves going down it. I knew.
My rogue, level 1 rogue with a +4 dex failed the dex save or the dex check and fell immediately. I was trying to lean over. Well, actually, our barbarian had already gone down and was getting attacked. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to lean over to shoot one of the rats, and I fell.
Yes.
Very ignominious beginning.
I was going to say, there were several things that happened in this opening of this dungeon that just were unfortunate. One of them was a little intentional. Okay, so then if people wonder, how did the citadel stay together while it was sinking into the earth? They believe that there were some magical remnants of structure in this, so that's why it didn't just crumble to pieces. Okay. After it fell in and the dragon cult was discovered to have been deceased, many creatures started inhabiting this citadel. Notably, a tribe of goblins from the Durbuluk tribe came in.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say, but I'm not goblin, so I don't think.
Kind of short.
But they moved in. They moved in, and they've lived in this citadel for over 100 years. So they're entrenched. More recently, a tribe of kobolds seemed to think that this was their spot, and especially after they discovered that there is evidence that worshipping of dragons happened in this. So a tribe of kobolds moved in. Apparently there's enough room, and as we discovered, there kind of is enough room for 2 tribes down here, but they are, since the kobolds have moved in, they're constantly skirmishing for space, as the kobolds believe that it's their right because of the shrine to Ashardalon. The goblins are like, hey, but we've been here for quite some time. So as a player, you might be able to participate in a little bit in their skirmishes.
Yes, that was one of the first notes, positive notes about this adventure, is you can, as a player, legitimately choose either side if you want to try to make a deal with.
Right. And you guys chose not to do a complete kill of one tribe or the other. You just gave advantage of one to the other.
Yeah.
And then, but then you just sort of bailed and went to the next level. So speaking of the next level, below the Citadel is a subterranean grove that does include some terrible stuff, and we'll talk about that as we go. But a powerful druid moved in, and boy, the goblins made way. They let him go down and just are happy that he stays down there. But the goblins are aware he's there. The kobolds also probably know that there's something down there because they don't travel very far. If they go down below, the kobolds and goblins, they don't get very far because they can tell that there's something awful down there. So that's how the Sunless Citadel got to where it is, and how some of the creatures that you will encounter arrived there. So this is what I really like about the 5th edition version of these what we used to call modules from the Tales of the Yawning Portal, is that here in 5th edition there are multiple planes of existence where this could show up on. So if you're playing in Eberron or you're playing in Greyhawk, they give you ideas of where these could be and what else might have, because Ashardalon is not necessarily native to Eberron. So what would have been there? So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through some of those.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to comment, and you know more of the history than I do, is that there really wasn't, not to cast shade, but coherent world building in the first couple editions, was there?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So here's a dungeon, here's another dungeon, and there's no, and so these guys are sort of backfilling.
Exactly.
And connecting
it all. Yeah. So the Sunless Citadel in 2000 was built for Faerun. So everything I read up there was intended to be in Faerun. More specifically, in the foothills northwest of Thunder Tree, it sank when Mount Hotno, I think that's how you say it, Hotno, erupted. And that would be in the region of Neverwinter, which is where the movie Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves takes place. So it's up in that area. If you play in the Dragonlance world of Krynn and want to play the Sunless Citadel, their suggestion is that it's a part of Jacques Sarath, of the worshippers of Takesis, and it fell during the Cataclysm, which was a massive, I don't even know how to describe it. Dragonlance people would do a much better job, but it was something, it messed everything up. Let's just put it that way. And so that's how you could use that in Dragonlance. In Eberron, it could be, so you guys have been here, not in this campaign that went through the Sunless Citadel, but the Waterdeep campaign, if you recall, when you were transferred to Eberron to fight, you came in on top of a flying ship and had a battle there, but then you landed just west of what's called the Mournland. That's the country that was completely annihilated in the last war, has the wall of fog. You go inside, everything's very dismal, dark, apocalyptic kind of. And so they suggest that if you're going to play the Sunless Citadel in Eberron, you locate it on the western edge, which is where you guys were, of the Mournland. The Citadel was already an ancient ruin at the outset of the last war, but agents of Sire used it as a waypoint during the war. And when the day of mourning, where the magical nuclear bomb or whatever you want to call it, but when that war ended, it sank into the ground when that blast happened.
Got it.
And then lastly, in Greyhawk, which now has been revived in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, we have a framework to work with that's a modern day, fits the 5th edition rules. It's located, this one I do not know very well, so I'm just going to read what they wrote. Located in northwest Bissell, in the foothills west of Thornward. The citadel is a ruin of the Backloonish. It sank when the Sewell Imperium released the invoked devastation. I have no idea what I just read because I still need to read that part.
Sounds terrifying, though.
It does. I do like it. I mean, the Sewell Imperium released the invoked devastation. I'm guessing it's the equivalent of the Day of Mourning and the Cataclysm of Dragonlance. I mean, what's a good fantasy world if it hasn't had some sort of a mass destruction that sets up a whole bunch of just adventure?
I don't know. I bet it goes further than this, but I wonder if these folks are influenced by C.S. Lewis, the Narnia books, The Magician's Nephew. They go to a world called Charn, and that's where the White Witch
she's
was originally from.
Oh.
And she unleashed. She was in a struggle with her sister for control of the world, and her sister was winning, and her armies were at the gate, and Jadis, who will eventually become the White Witch, looked at her sister's triumph and unleashed the word, and it kills everybody except the person who spoke it.
Whoa, that's a serious power word kill.
And so that sort of unleashed devastation that changes an entire world.
So. Okay, not to get off the subject. I've read obviously Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then this. What's the book that comes chronologically after that? Is that
Caspian.
Prince Caspian? So I've read those two. Loved them. I don't know why I stopped. I think it's because I discovered then Tolkien.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to go back and read that whole series.
So The Magician's Nephew is a prequel.
Okay.
And he wrote it in the original order. It was the 6th of the 7.
Okay, but it takes place prior to...
So it explains how the White Witch got to Narnia in the first place.
Okay. The Boy in the Silver Chair? I got that all wrong.
So it's Lion, Witch, Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Those are all chronological.
Okay.
And then you jump forward. Silver Chair is as well, but you've lost the Pevensey kids and you're on to their cousin or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And then Horse and his boy jumps back to when they were ruling Narnia. Mm. So they're sort of side characters. You don't meet them until the very end.
Okay.
And then it's Magician's Nephew, which is the origin, and then the last battle, which is how Narnia ends.
Okay. Man, that's a lot.
So, but they're all really short. So
yeah, they're not long. I think I could probably power through those pretty quickly now as an adult. And
as you can probably tell, I read them multiple times. As
yes,
a kid.
Yes.
Those books.
When it comes to now, I know that about you and Narnia or C.S. Lewis. Because that you're usually my go-to for the Tolkien books. I mean, I've read the trilogy several times, but not to the degree at which you have, I think. And as I'm slowly making my way through the Silmarillion, you're always my go-to of, okay, wait. So,
no, that's in that. It took me a couple of false starts before I could really get into the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
School. You treat it as like a Bullfinch's mythology or something like that. Here's a series of stories that are loosely connected.
Yeah.
Then it's easier to...
I think that's, yes, like walking into it with that knowledge, I think has helped me because I don't know that I'd have gotten to where I am now. Someone asked me, how do you describe the reading of Silmarillion? It's not textbook. It's
like a chronicle.
Okay. Yes.
This happened and this happened.
It's nothing very specific.
No.
It's all very generalized. I mean, you get people's names and maybe something that they did that was notable, but not how did they get there? How did they do it? They just defeated something and then...
Yes. And it's it's very mythic in its descriptions. But what I really, again, the history geek in me, you read it and you stumble across Galadriel. Like, wait, what? What?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Where's and and just things that are dropped that reference, and you get out the map, and at first it means nothing at all to you, and then you're like, wait, that little tiny mountain range in the Third Age that's right by the Shire is this gigantic mountain range on this map, and there's a whole other land to the west, and it's been lost beneath the seas. And
I have been looking for some connection on those maps.
Yes.
And I just, because they'll talk about things and I'm like, I don't recognize. There's pieces that you're like, I think that's Mordor, but it's in the wrong place.
No, it's arid. It's the arid blue, and the Blue Mountains used to be a complete range.
Okay.
And now there's just two little bits, and that's why there are elves there, because that's the only bit of the first. Beleriand is the land that they're in. That's the only bit that didn't sink beneath the waves.
Okay. All right.
So, detour, sorry.
But hey, we're here to talk about the Sunless Citadel. But you know what? How lore transfers and goes and builds on other stories. And that's kind of where that whole conversation came from. So back to the Sunless Citadel. So we're to the point where we'll talk a little bit about the level descriptions. Here's what I did is I took 3 different features in this particular fortress. It'll be different every dungeon, I suspect. But I just give some characteristics, and then I'll let you ask questions or be like, okay. So the layout of the fortress level. So nothing super fancy on this. I said it's the typical layout of a fortress. You're not diving into a dungeon quite yet. You're just down low. And so you have galleries and corridors, tombs and pillared halls and mess halls and a prison, chambers, barracks, all the things you'd expect if you were walking into a keep or a castle or a fortress. So nothing super complex with that. I mean, sometimes the passageways and things can be, and there's some secret passages and stuff like that, but nothing super fancy that is out of the ordinary. Already talked a little bit about this, but you do find evidence of the dragon cult while you're in this part of the dungeon. You have a tomb of a dragon priest. There is a dragon throne, a dragon hall. There's a trophy room that has a very special surprise, especially for first and second level characters. So there's a creature in here that this one I will leave unnamed, but there's a nice surprise when you get to this room. And then it has your, I guess I would call typical traps. There's some pits that we had some fun with in the entrance, and riddles and puzzles. So it has all of the makings of, a great starting adventure.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, I don't know if I have any questions about it, but the reviews that I read remarked on the fact that it's a fun dungeon to explore. That it's and we'll probably come back to this, but they also mentioned that the strength of this is considered one of the best dungeons out there from published materials.
Okay.
And the reason is it gives you a perfect introduction to what classic D&D is. It is a dungeon crawl there at the top.
I mean, I was not familiar with this in 2000 when it came out. In fact, I was just kind of getting back into Dungeons and Dragons around that time because I took a break in the 90s for some dumb maybe 4th edition. I don't know. Somewhere in there. Anyway, but when this book came out and we were getting our group together, I read the Sunless Citadel and was like, this is perfect. It's a good primer for me to get back into it and to introduce you guys to, D&D. So not surprised to hear that. And the first level, very I mean, you're checking doors for traps. You're walking into a room and assessing the situation. We're using passive perception, and you guys are searching walls and panels and that kind of stuff. And it's all real basic Dungeons and Dragons. It's exactly what you would expect. Now, when you get down below, you start to feel more like you are in a dungeon. This is in the module. This is titled the Grove level. it's a little unclear to me in this. I don't know if this was part of the Citadel originally, or if the individual who came here like modified and made this into this. I mean, there's some rooms that would imply that there was a basement to the Citadel when it fell, but then there's additional like caverns that I think were either discovered and it sank into. Maybe that's probably what happened.
That could be.
But there's no story about like how did this underground level come to be. So underground, this is where things get interesting and unexpected, because there are gardens and arboretums, and there are laboratories, which are the rooms that you might think were part of the Citadel when it sank. There is an actual shrine to Ashar-Dalan. Now, you find some evidence of Ashar-Dalan up above, of the worship of him, but here there's an actual shrine to him. There is a dragon library, which again implies that these rooms were here, and saying large is, I don't want to say it's a gargantuan, but it is it's the large of the large. It's an extra large grove that is kind of unexpected to see underground. And it doesn't take as long to get through the second level, other than this is the boss level. It's a little smaller in size to the level that's up above. So anything about the second level that you remember or recall?
Well, so a couple things just to continue with sort of the online reviews.
Yes.
The quote that stuck with me was very simple. It said, "The lower levels are creepy as blank." So that it was again, it was spoken of very highly, that there's definitely a tone change as you drop down a level. Mm-hmm. What I mostly remember from this is, I don't want to say remember, as I look back, what I really think about is, or what comes up is regret, because I was a new player and I was still trying to, quote, win the game.
Oh.
And so I didn't get, when Rix pushed Zedai into the hole, I was like, what are you doing? That's not how we win.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize Chris was probably trying to teach us, no, this is how you play.
Yes.
So that was a learning experience. And I was thinking about the gnome in the cage and how we spent so much time trying to figure out what should we do, and being irritated with Chris for stealing trinkets and thinking, we're going to get in trouble. Don't do that. That's going to make things worse. I'm like, no, you're missing the point, you idiot. Come on. He's doing it. You should be sort of modeling yourself after what he's doing. But that, and then I do remember the lower level being creepy. I do remember, again, seeing things that as, like, I was metagaming. I metagamed I don't know how you tolerated us. I can remember when we discovered, spoiler, so mute this if you think it's an issue, when we discovered the white dragon wormling.
Yes.
And I remember telling everybody, I think white's good. I think that's, that's a good color. and then just,
white is good, black is bad.
And then well, I don't know what I was thinking. I knew red was bad too, but I didn't know about, as a player, I didn't know about the metallic dragons.
Yes.
So I just assumed there were, whatever, 3 good, 3 bad colors. Mm-hmm. And to me, white and blue and green, those sound happy.
Right.
Yeah, and so then Zedai took a blast of cold in the face, and yes. So yeah, I'm glad you said that about the tone change from the up above. There's some things that make the exploration of the first level a little bit more fun and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. There's the kobold hireling that comes along with you, Meepo. Remember Meepo? And so you can have fun with Meepo. And then there is the gnome that you come across where you can have some fun and discussion about that. But when you get down below, it definitely does change, because you were initially attacked by undead right away when you get down there. But then there's a kind of a bad dude that you fight who has a couple of familiars that
that make things a little difficult very soon after you come down there. And then you get to the laboratories, which gets a little weird.
Yeah.
And it's all plant life experimentation, but there's some odd things you come across in those laboratories.
It's a very tragic story, really.
It is.
By
yes.
the time you finish it.
Right.
And I think that's another good thing that it kind of, warns the player, hey, there's not necessarily the nice little Hollywood happy ending each time with these.
Exactly.
What you do has consequences, and sometimes there are no good choices. And
yes, this one does not. There's nothing you can do to make everybody happy at the end of this, which, again, for an introductory dungeon, that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah. But maybe a warning if you are thinking of running this and you've got players that
are younger.
Yeah, or very much want the Hollywood hero, which is fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to need to modify or avoid.
Right. And this would not be difficult to modify.
No.
I played it to be awful. Okay. So next part of our conversation of dungeons is, what are you going to find here when you're down here? So we've already mentioned that there are goblins and kobolds. And as an NPC, you come across Chief Dern, who is the goblin chief. And you can parlay with these people or these creatures. Unless you are hostile. Oh, that might be a spoiler too. Unless you're hostile, you can talk to both Goblin Chief Dern as well as the Kobold leader, Eustrial. They will ask you questions. They will ask for your help. They will offer help. Some other just creatures that you will come across in the Sunless Citadel are quasits, trolls, bugbears, rats. I mentioned some undead, as well as who you're looking for is his name. I've mentioned him briefly. He is Belloc. Yeah.
Don't forget the twig blights.
Yes, there are a number of twig blights, and there's a reason for that. Belloc is the powerful druid that was drawn to the Sunless Citadel. When you get to him, you realize what drew him here. And it's actually part of the unique portion of this,
the lore,
the lore and the unique characteristics of this. So I'll just move to that, unless you have anything you want to say about the inhabitants. So the unique characteristic of the Sunless Citadel is it's a legendary tree. I mean, I don't know if I seem to think that there's only one, but I don't think that's accurate. I think there's probably a few of them, but because if you play this right, you might potentially destroy this legendary tree. It's called the Gulthias tree. And this is where twig blights come from. The Gulthias tree will grow a red fruit in the summer and a white fruit in the winter, and those apples that it creates, the seeds of them become twig blights. And so this whole area, you guys encountered twig blights before you ever got to the Sunless Citadel, a number of them. You even got wind in the village that's near there, Oakhurst, I believe is the name of it, that these weird happenings were going on and people couldn't identify what it was that was killing their livestock and blah, 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 because there's no evidence.
Yep.
Twig blights. They're like a CR like they're a quarter CR.
Yep.
They've got like 4 hit points, something like that. But they're not intended to be encountered alone. They're intended to be encountered in masses.
Yes.
So
I used those in homebrew against you guys at a lower level.
Oh, right.
And messed you up.
Yes, they did. I remember that. So some other features about the Gulthias tree that are just cool. I love the lore of this is that besides the fruit, if you get close enough to the Gulthias tree or you touch the Gulthias tree, it will attempt to pull you into it and assimilate you into the tree. And after 24 hours, let's see. No, I'm sorry. It's the other way around. It will take 24 hours once you're trapped to be sucked into the tree. And then it takes an hour to come back out of it. But now you are a thrall of the tree. You have bark skin and all of that, but you are neutral evil, and you do the bad biddings of the Gulthias tree.
Right.
that might give you a clue as to what has happened down here with Belloc, as well as he has 2 thralls, which are part of the larger story, but it's not really necessarily part of the dungeon, so I wasn't going to mention them. Yeah. But Belloc certainly does have 2 thralls there that are significant. You have to get through them as you're trying to get to Belloc. I don't think this is what you guys did, but one feature about the Gulthias tree, and I don't know if this showed up in your reviews or not, is if you burn the Gulthias tree down, in 24 hours, all of its thralls, and it can only have 4 at a time, all of its thralls, no matter where they are, will die.
Yeah.
And that's the tragic part.
Yes. There's no revival. You can't get them back.
Once they've been encompassed and created a thrall of the Gulthias tree. But again, that's where you could modify it as well. Mm-hmm. You could say if you can modify it for your first level characters or for your young players, that hey, if you figure out, you can release them. But yeah, the tragic part is there's nothing you can do to save these people. No. And the other part that I was, as DM, I was kind of like, I wonder what they're going to do with the tree, because it is legendary. Supposedly there's only one of them. Will you destroy it, or will you just leave it here? Just, do something to collapse the grove or so. I don't know. But I think you guys just left it.
I don't even remember what we did.
Yeah, I think you just left it once you'd killed the thralls.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Gulthias then exists. I think this was on me, but I don't think you ever, thought, oh, the problem with Oakhurst is these twig blights, and this is what makes the twig blight.
We never made the connection.
Yeah, and that might be a little bit on me. I didn't tell the story well enough. But that to me is the massive, unique piece to this dungeon. Mm-hmm. Is this Gulthias tree. The other unique piece of the dungeon is its simplicity.
Yes.
It's designed for first level, and for those of you that are thinking about DMing and have never DM'd before, this is a great starter point. It did a lot to get me back into being a dungeon master. I made some mistakes along the way, but that's part of learning and getting better. Mm-hmm. But overall, what were the reviews?
So I've pretty much said them, but as I said, it is considered one of the best published dungeons from Wizards. And I think the overall positives of it, it's excellent for an introductory play for characters who are just getting started, so they can see what the range of D&D. You've got it all. In addition, relatively low stakes. You're not saving the world.
Right.
It's just solving a mystery and maybe trying to help some people if you can. Mm-hmm. It is very well thought out for the most part. They said that and again, what made it unique for the time was when it was published, it was one of the few dungeon modules that had internal logic and enough lore to kind of keep it afloat. Mm-hmm. And overall, that just made it a very strong adventure. The things I read did look for a couple of flaws, and it mostly came down to this part doesn't make logical sense or whatever.
Oh, sure.
But I'm not even going to bother with those because they're minor.
It's Dungeons and Dragons,
yeah,
and it's fantasy world, so sometimes you have to give it grace. I thought playing this dungeon was a ton of fun. Coming back and reviewing it and looking at it again, I thought of lots of opportunities that I wouldn't say missed, but lots of opportunities that I could revisit if I ever wanted to run this again for a different group. So, I would give this dungeon an A if we were giving it a grade for all the reasons that you mentioned in the reviews that you found. It's got a lot of cool pieces to it. Oh, this is the other thing about it. When you mentioned the low stakes, it is possible if you get down there and you find Belloc and the tree, but you're kind of beat up, you could go back up if they haven't seen you and they don't see you right away. There's ways to sneak up because you're in a huge grove that is overgrown. Now it's hard to get through it, but it's also that makes it easier to hide in. You could go back up, and if you befriended the goblins or the kobolds, they will give you quarter. You could rest up, Maybe even you could potentially even leave the dungeon, maybe go up a level someplace and then come back. So there's lots of opportunity to revisit this if you don't feel like you're prepared to fight Belloc.
Yeah.
So he's a cool character too, and the story of his other two thralls is intriguing, and you could get some reward there as well. There is magic to be found in here. I was noting that there are several scrolls and potions. I believe there's a weapon, a fairly significant weapon for a first level group that's in this. Oh, in fact, yes, there is a significant weapon that you can gather if you are, you can gather a pretty significant weapon. Let's just leave it at that. So anyway, any final thoughts on the Sunless Citadel?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay. If you have any thoughts about the Sunless Citadel, or if there's something else you'd like to hear about a dungeon that we missed, please let us know. Send us an email at teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. You can also join us on social media at Facebook and Instagram as Teachers in the Dungeon. We're also on X at Dungeon Teachers, and we have featured episodes that we do here on YouTube. And this is one that if you're listening to YouTube, you found it. But but nonetheless, we have featured shows on YouTube where you get some visuals of the things that we talk about. So with all of that being said, for Dan, I'm Tom. Until next week, keep rolling those 20s.